At this time, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Tom Dart. Sheriff Dart has lived a life dedicated to effectuating change, protecting the unprotected, and fighting for social justice. After serving the community as a prosecutor and a state legislator, Sheriff Dart decided to run for Cook County Sheriff in 2006 on the promise of using his incredible platform to advocate on behalf of the most vulnerable and neglected communities among us. In the ensuing years, he has fulfilled that promise by enacting meaningful social justice reforms and rewritten the book on what a sheriff can accomplish. In particular, Sheriff Dart's restorative justice vision has reduced the number of nonviolent offenders detained at Cook County Jail, the largest single-site prison in the nation, while spreading awareness nationally of the ongoing criminalization of mental illness. In 2015, he worked to enact the Rocket Docket into law, which has resulted in the faster disposition of retail theft and criminal trespassing cases through the system. In 2009, Time magazine named Sheriff Dart one of the 100 most influential people in the world, thanks to his groundbreaking efforts. He and his wife, Patricia, live on the Chicago South Side and are proud parents of 5 children. Welcome, Sheriff Dart.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. And Camille, that was so sweet of you. I can't thank you enough. It's inspiring to hear what you're getting done. Depressing to hear how bad it. I always thought the dysfunction was, with us, but it's no. It's yeah, I know. But that's the thing that has perplexed me literally forever, because I've tried to get my arms around why is it the way it is. And I haven't come to the reason yet, but the thing that I found so disturbing about it is I think that we are a thoughtful people, we're a caring people, but yet why is it so many of the things that we do not reflect that? And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're no different than generations that have gone before us, where people think too often right in the moment. They don't think about bigger issues. And what I mean by that, they don't think about how they're going to be viewed down the road by posterity. And yet, when you think about it, I guess that all hovers around all of us and all of our decisions we make. Who wants to live a life that 100 years from now, people think you were rotten, you were thoughtless, you were the worst? 10, 15 years ago, I think it was Tom Brokaw wrote the book about the best generation. He talked about the World War II people and stuff. That was a glowing comment on those people from that generation. It's what people really always want to be thought of. And so I often think about it, and I think to myself that we're no different than anybody else. And what I mean by that is, you think about it. You go back in history, take your pick wherever, and more often than not, people in their era is judged by how they treated their fellow man. That's really sort of how we look at it. And you think also about this. At that moment in time, when that era was going on, I guarantee most of the people at that time were thinking that they were pretty good people. They were thoughtful. They were somewhat enlightened. I dare say, though, when you start actually scanning backwards through history, you find that that's not how it's all playing out. And I think about England, particularly back in like the 1850s. They were quite enlightened. They had done marvelous things. They frankly ruled the world. Everywhere it was England. And yet, when you think about 1850 England, more often than not, you're drawn to their probably preeminent author at the time, Charles Dickens. And when you think about what he wrote about a society that was rotten, absolutely rotten. They treated the poor, the people involved in the criminal justice system, people with mental illness, in the most horrific way. And that's somewhat how when people, who read, there's the few people that still read, when they read about history and they think about that era, that's the picture that they're painting. And I often think to myself, that is true, and that's how it's viewed. 100 years from now, if people were going to be looking at us and our generation, we would be viewed the same way. And I absolutely feel we deserve it. We absolutely deserve it. We go about our lives thinking this is fantastic. We all have our new iPhones and everybody has some new app and everything is just glorious. But 150 years from now, people are going to look back and say, oh my God, those are those horrible people that locked up all the mentally ill in prisons and jails. They were those horrible people that incarcerated people based on, frankly, crimes of poverty, crimes of desperation. And then they launched them back in the system, knowing full well that the system they set up was destined to fail, and the people would be coming back in. And they absolutely did not care. They did not care. And they perpetuated that. That would absolutely be accurate. And who amongst us right now wants that to be our legacy 150 years from now? No one does. But that's what we're walking into, and why that is happening is sort of what Camille was referencing earlier. There's these thoughtless programs that most of us really don't have reason to know about because we're busy with our lives. We have children, we have families, we have relatives, we have all the rest of it. Our careers, our jobs take a lot of our life, so you don't really venture into other areas too often to look at things. This group here obviously is quite different. You folks are all engaged in what I consider, a defining issue for our generation. But for most people, they don't really look at those things. And so they don't realize that in our prison system, that you have individuals who are being told you have to pay a fee for basic health care. So you gotta be kidding me. I mean, wouldn't even think of doing that. I mean, it's like, wait, let me get this straight. We've incarcerated you. Last I checked, you don't want to be here. And now we're going to charge you for basic health care as well. I really don't understand how that makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But what I found too often is that, and quite to my embarrassment, because it was mentioned in my bio, I used to be a prosecutor. And I was a prosecutor for 5 years. And as God is my witness, I really did think the system worked well. The people that I had come in front of me in court every day, by and large, pled guilty. I mean, that was the case. They had attorneys. They had right to jury trials. All these different rights were embedded in there. So I myself did not see it as being as big a train wreck as it is. But from this other lens that I have now, from the sheriff's office, I can tell you that the criminal justice system is illogical, dysfunctional, and outrageously inefficient and devoid of compassion. And it's really not what we're about. I often tell you, that's really not us. So how does that go on? The very thing I just mentioned about with my own life is one of the reasons it goes on that way is because I think all of us fall back on the fact that, we live in the United States, the greatest country in the world, greatest country ever, and all of these individual rights are embedded in there with rights to lawyers. How could it be bad? How could it not work? Well, I can tell you it does not work. It absolutely does not work. And it is right in front of us. And I hope we aren't going to fall back on the fact that decades from now, we're all just going to sit there and say, well, how was I supposed to know? And it wasn't my job. Well, I would suggest to you, as a member of this society, it's all of our jobs. It's all of our concern. And we really do need to engage with that. I talk with the people that we have in our custody on a regular basis. And the interaction I have with them, I walk away from it more often than not thinking that given that individual's background, if I had that same type of life handed to me, I would be sitting right next to him. I'm not special. And yet, at the same time, I sit there and say to myself, now a thoughtful society would come up with strategies to deal with this. And we haven't. I mean, in our county, just objectively, we're light years ahead of everybody else, which is, as you read in the paper, Cook County is not normally known for those things. Yeah, it's a little bit different. But we have people coming from all over the country and frankly all over the world now to come and see how we do things. And I can't emphasize enough to you that I find to be one of the biggest tragedies of this all is that I'm sort of running the show and I'm a history major. Okay? It's like, I wasn't a criminal justice major. I wasn't someone that was involved in any of these other things that you would think would naturally, mitigate or, something where this is what would fit. And so I'm doing it. Where do the pathways that we come up with, where do they come from? I'll tell you what, they come from one and only one place. I try to think of how would I want to be treated if it was either me or a loved one in this situation. Nothing extraordinary, but how would I want to be treated? And to keep coming back to the same notion, I'd want to be treated thoughtfully. I want to be treated with respect and thoughtfully. And the criminal justice system has never done that. It treats people, frankly, as sort of an object, that you're in the system, this is what you've done, this is what your background is, and off you go. And the reality is, not only is everybody an individual person, but everybody has an individual story. And we have to have a system that is, open to that and thinks about that. And the mentally ill, that was frankly, as far as I'm concerned, the easiest part of what I worked on, because that was such an abomination. Still is, but not so much with us. but around the country it still is. It wasn't unique to us, but it's going on everywhere. Everywhere in this country, it's the same thing. 47 or 8, frankly, it's somewhat irrelevant, 47 or 48 of the 50 states, the largest mental health provider is a prison or a hospital in that state. Is that how, once again, 100 years from now, is that how we want people to look at us? It's like, where were all their mentally ill? How did they deal with them? Oh, they put them all in prisons and in jails. And I often think to people, I was like, okay, well now maybe let's walk through this one. Maybe they were thoughtful and decided that's the best place for them. And it's like, well, I can't think of one psychologist or psychiatrist who would sit there and say, the plan for this individual with, say, bipolar disorder is we're going to put them in a 4x8 concrete room with a complete stranger for an indeterminate period of time, and then at a time uncertain, by the way, we're just going to let them go into the street. Yeah, that's a really good plan. But that is, in fact, what has gone on. All this country still goes on right today. All around the country, they've shut down mental health clinics and hospitals everywhere. And it's not because they have this robust program in the community for these community providers. Oh, God, no. They've cut those as well. And so people with a mental illness who've struggled with this, many of them for their entire lives, do what you would expect to happen. I can walk you right through this because it's the same story all the time. They have lost their job. They are back at home with their family. Their family loves them intensely, works with them, tries, but at some point the individual won't take their medications. They've had to call the police to the house numerous times because of domestic-related issues that flow from that. Eventually they're asked to leave the house. They're then homeless. They wander the streets, and then guess what? They get arrested. By mental health providers? Are they the ones that intervene? Oh, God, no. It's police officers, people who were never trained to deal with individuals with these conditions. And then they're taken into custody. What? To treat them? No, to go and proceed in a criminal action against someone who doesn't even have the capacity to have a crime committed. And so that is what would play out. And so what the charges are, most of the people that have mental illness were criminal trespass to land. They were looking for a place to sleep. Literally, that's what that means. Theft. They were trying to find something to eat. Frequently, they'll say, well, there was an act of violence. And I go, what was that act of violence? Well, in the criminal justice system, they've just all categorized it together, whether it's a murder or whether it's resisting police officer. Well, yeah, they resisted a police officer because they were psychotic at the time. They hadn't been on their meds. A stranger in a uniform approached them, and they took a swing at them. Is that something we're all shocked about? But yet we then throw them in, categorize them as somebody who is violent. In the criminal justice system, the tragedy of that is so immense that I often tell people, once again, getting back to this notion about like a thoughtful society, any society on the planet, anywhere you go, I would strongly, strongly suggest to you, the most impactful thing that society could do to the members of its society would be, 1, execute them, 2, incarcerate them. After that, you can start playing around with whether it's taxing them, zoning them, other things to intervene in their lives. But if that is, in fact, the second most significant thing we can do to our citizenry, wouldn't you think that it would be the most rigorously studied and examined thing in the world? You would hope so. And yet, that is absolutely not the truth. Absolutely not the truth. When I became sheriff, our entire jail management system, that would tell me anything about the jail, was a DOS-based computer system, which meant that it spit out these big green sheets of paper that I was lucky if I could tell you who was in the place, let alone why they're there, where they're going, where they live. But it was indicative of the fact that the criminal justice system all throughout the country doesn't look at that as part of their job. Sheriff, you're just supposed to hold them, feed them, and when you get an order, release them. What got them there? You don't care. What they're going to do when they leave? You don't care. Judges, you just listen to the case, come up with a sentence. Public defender, defend them. State's attorney, prosecute them. And so that was the roles of everybody in the system. And most people thought that's the system working appropriately. That is not us, and it shouldn't be us. What we should look at it is in a very, very thoughtful way, in a simplistic way. It's an individual who's come in contact with law enforcement. An individual has an issue. Let's figure out what it is. For the people, the violence, yes, we do need prisons and jails to keep them away from people because some of them are horrible people who will hurt people. So we got to keep them away. But that's the smallest part of the population. The larger part are people who have made mistakes, people who have substance abuse issues, mental health issues, and those are people that we can and should put plans together. So that's what we've done at our place, and we've been doing it for years. I absolutely made it up as I was going along. I mean, literally, it wasn't like I looked around the country thinking, okay, someone's got to be doing it better than us, and they weren't. They were just as thoughtless, if not worse than us. And so I just started making it up. And in making it up, it was something where it was actually quite easy. I didn't need any additional money. I just took money I already had and just spent it differently. And in doing that, we put it in place where it's basically a case management system for the mentally ill and the non-mentally ill. When they come in, we find out what it was that got them there, what are their issues, where they're going to go when they leave, and then facilitate. Just like Camille was saying, we sign people up for the Affordable Care Act at intake. We've signed up about 20,000 people now. And when they're with us, then we push them into programming. I can't force them, but we make it pretty enticing with an array of programs to give them skills. So when they leave, then they have opportunities. And when they leave, we just don't cut you loose and say, good luck. We have discharge planning, where we actually put a plan together for people when they leave us. And when people can't get home, we drive them. And that was something where I remember talking to my staff. I was like, we got all these buses and vans laying around here, and we don't really use them later in the day. Let's drive people home. I go, that is something that could make the difference between someone coming back here and someone succeeding, that we just got them home. And so we do those things now. People think it's sort of crazy, some of the stuff I do, and maybe it'll play out that way, I don't know. But it really is something where it's just a question of being thoughtful and trying to come up with a system that's logical, where you're trying to help people and trying to guide them towards success. And so at the end of the day, we're really somewhat at a crossroads now. There's movement going on in the criminal justice system. In our county, we're been able to see some success recently where the judiciary has gotten engaged. And I've had some really harsh words for the judiciary over the years, and I probably still will, but it'll be with the notion that they are moving now, that we actually are having thoughtful bond hearings. Our bond process was an abomination up until about 6 months ago. And we've made some changes now, so we aren't incarcerating people. Not all the time, but most of the time. We aren't incarcerating because they're poor anymore, which was what we were doing. And so we have changes afoot. There's a lot of room for optimism here, but this will not change unless people collectively come to the understanding that the people that are incarcerated, yes, we have some people that I would classify as evil. I don't know how they got there. I don't know how they got there. But they're our smallest group. The rest of them are people who have made mistakes, no different than you and I, who need help. And with doing that, they can become members of the community and become a beacon. And with places like this, that's how we do it. This isn't really higher math, folks. People who've been incarcerated need places to land like this so they can be stabilized and move on with a productive life. It's not hard. But collectively, throughout the country, people have never seen that as a role of jails. Why? Jails are just supposed to hold them for this little window of time until they had their trial, and then everyone thinks that they then head off to prison. The entire prison system last year released about 33,000 or so people from the prison back to the community, all of the prisons in Illinois. My one jail, we released over 40,000 people last year from the jail to the community. So I released more than anybody, but yet jails were never seen as the point of contact where you try to intervene, because they were all supposed to go to prison. Well, that's not true. And jails weren't supposed to be the point to really intervene either, because we don't have them for a defined period of time, because we never know when their case is going to be disposed of. So sheriffs just said, we're not going to do programming. There's no point. We don't know if they're going to finish the program. But yet it requires all of us, because we're a little bit different. Our people spend a great deal of time waiting on their trials here, but they have issues like that around the country. But it's incumbent upon everybody who's engaged with a jail to be actively involved with programming, because we are the hub. We are the ones sending people back to the community. And many of these are communities that have a lot of issues and a lot of support systems that are not there. And so it's incumbent upon places like this to try to fill that gap. It's just so important. This isn't really higher math. If you give somebody hope and you give them a pathway, they will not come back. But if you don't, and you're just careless and thoughtless, they'll come back, and then 100, 150 years from now, we rightfully will be looked upon in a horrible way. Thank you so much.
Questions for Sheriff Dart?
Yes. Just true and false, probably.
I applaud you for what you have done.
Oh, thank you.
What you are doing and what you're making a difference.
Oh, that's so kind.
We would love for you to say all the centers, if we could come and register them to vote on one day.
You know what I'm on board. It's funny because I had a bunch of different individuals from the different voting groups come to meet with me about like a month or so ago, because we've done voting related things in the jail for years. But they came there and it was actually pretty comical because they came in there, it was like 8 or 9 people and meet with me, and you can tell there's a little trepidation and they're talking to me. And so is they're saying something, I said, listen, whatever you guys want to do, I'm on board. And they're like, what? And I go, yeah. And they said, well, do you, I go, no, whatever you want to do. I go, I prefer, in addition to registering people vote, if you can come up with an educational component so we can educate people too about the issues in a real, nonpartisan way, but to do that. And they're like, you can tell there's like this hesitancy. I go, some of you I may have heard of me, other ones haven't. In case you haven't figured out, I go, I am like way on the sort of progressive side of things. I go, I don't know if you thought you were talking to Sheriff Joe Arpaio and that's who you're going to be meeting. I go, but no, whatever you guys want to do, I'm on board. You see, the nuance part, and I tried to drive it home to him, is that because of the transient nature of our population, people need to be very aware of that, because if not, they actually might hurt the voting part of it, because they'll come up with a static voting model that would work anywhere but a jail and think it's done well, and actually it's hurt it because you aren't taking into account that this person came in our custody only for 3 hours. This one was in for 6 days. And so we have to have it done where we're taking into account the nature of the population we have. So I'm on board with anything, but I just need whoever's working on it to be very aware of the dynamics of the jail so we haven't hurt things. But the big thing was I really want to get that educational component because, obviously we have a captive audience. And so they're in these living units where the TV's always going, and I could play messages as long as I don't get goofy, because if I get goofy and put too much higher thinking on there, the TVs have a tendency to get ripped out of the wall. So if we can put something on there that is helpful and educational, let's do it.
We have the automatic voter registration now, so that is possible for all.
Yeah, if you guys keep racing ahead so fast on all that stuff that I can't keep up with it.
You are keeping up.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently we're doing something. Whatever you guys need, just as I said, whatever we can do to increase the participation, because as Camille stated, it really is, once again, a horrible statement of our society that, a lot of people like to run around and say that, this is a sentence an individual got and they deserved it. Now they've done their time. Oh, God, no. We put so many other hurdles on. They call them collateral results as a result of being incarcerated, where people lose their voting rights. People don't know they have voting rights. They have records that they can't expunge. I remember talking to one of my friends I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a real lawyer. And I asked him, I said, I have an individual, I was wondering if you can help with an expungement. And he said, yeah, I'd be happy to do it. He said, just so you know, Tom, I would rather try a murder case than do an expungement, because expungement is so complicated and convoluted that individuals get turned off immediately because it's so difficult even for lawyers to figure it out. And so that's why down in Springfield, I've had 3 bills that I was really proud of. But just to give you an idea, that same thing Camille talked about the backwards way of thinking, one of the things which I honestly thought was a no-brainer was saying that the $120 fee you need to file for expungement, we waive it if you were found not guilty or the charges were dropped. I was like, I thought that's pretty reasonable. You didn't do it, so we shouldn't charge you. And the state police was fighting me tooth and nail, and I finally called them and said, what gives? I said, well, that's a lot of money for us. And I go, you're clearly not listening to me. They didn't do it. And they said, well, that's a lot of money. I go, hey, then let's just dispense with that. Let's just start picking people out of the phone book. Let's pick random names. I go, let's randomly pick people and just charge them. I go, this is nuts. And so eventually I won out, but that was one of those ones I was like, oh my God, this is insane. So we got rid of the fee on that, but then we were able to remove all the fees for juvenile expungement. But then the other one too, which was another example, Camille, of just how goofy the system was. So certain offenses that you commit, you can never get expunged. And I think some people would have no issue, if, certain really violent offenses, whatever, okay? But that same individual then, if they served their time, say it was 20 years ago they've been out, if they had another offense, like a driving offense, They couldn't get that. It was dropped. They couldn't even get that out. Once you had that one bad offense, you could never expunge anything else. And it's like, can you walk me through the logic of that? And there was none. And so we were able to get that one changed as well, because that was a hurdle for so many people, because they had the one bad act, and some of them aren't even that bad, to be quite frank with you. But it meant they couldn't do it. So it's really sort of peeling this onion back to find all these things that are so illogical. Because if we were logical, we'd be sitting there saying, okay, this person did serve their time. Now we're trying to set them up to succeed, not to fail. So we're not going to make it so they don't have anywhere to live because they're prohibited from housing here, here, and here. We're prohibited from voting. They can't get a job because this, So we've been making progress, but boy, oh boy, there's a lot to do still. There really is. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank you and commend you on the change you have made, especially when I heard you talk about the transportation for the people that's getting out when they get out. Because that road to get to where you're going, it can be hectic. I mean, I've been in there and I have got out and have been raped, robbed, and everything.
Oh, you're so, no, please. Honest to God, my own lawyers would tell me, don't do it, Tom, because every minute we hold someone past that time when we've been told to release them, we accumulate more liability because they're not supposed to be there. So if something bad happens, they fall down and hit their head, they punch somebody or get punched, we got a lot of liability. And I said, yeah, I get that. But on the other hand, how can we look ourselves in the mirror in the morning knowing full well that we are throwing people out in those conditions, knowing full well what they're walking back into? I go, you can't do that. And so we've been doing it for, I don't know, 9-10 years now, whatever it is. I can't believe I've been sheriff this long. And it's just been something where you gradually gotten people to buy into the notion. And so we actually have this other thing we've worked on with the Heartland Alliance too, and I think it's tasks, but I get thresholds and tasks mixed up. They're both great, and I mix them together sometimes. But where individuals, when they leave us, if they aren't stabilized yet, we have these trailers right by the jail now where they can come and stay there for up to 3 days to get stabilized. We have doctors there, nurses there, social workers to help get them back into the community in the proper way. So we have these really cool things that we have going there to be more thoughtful. But as you can imagine, we talk to everybody when they're leaving, and we offer them all these different things. A lot of people just want to get out of there, and I don't take any offense to that. I understand, but they don't want to avail themselves of certain things. So that's a little bit tricky. What I've been trying to do for years now, and I've had absolutely no luck whatsoever, is I've been trying to get the faith-based community more engaged with me in trying to build a connection to individuals when they're with me, so that I can sort of hand them off to them. But I fully acknowledge when I've tried doing this, I have no money to give them. So I'm asking them to do this sort of, for free. But I said, listen, I'll drive people wherever you want. We have a 24-hour hotline that we can respond to if something goes, wrong or whatever it is. So we've had all these different really sort of cool things that don't get as much attention. I get more attention, on my cooking programs, and we have got music program and chess programs and yoga programs and all these other things. They get more attention, but these other ones I think are actually more meaningful. We don't get as much attention, which is okay, but it's we're just trying to get it. So just like you were saying, I'll never forget, I was talking to this one woman one day, and I was just sitting there with her, and I was saying, so how's it going? She says, fine, Sheriff, this has been much better than it had been in the past. And I was like, great. And I said, I'm depressed to hear you've been here before. And she goes, yeah. He goes, but I'm not coming back this time. I said, why is that? She goes, I'm very lucky. Unlike a lot of people, I have some supportive parents who are sticking with me. And I said, that's awesome. And I said, well, why is it going to work this time? And she said, they're going to meet me out in front. I go, walk me through this. And she goes, last time I was in here, and she was in on drug-related cases. She had substance abuse issues. She said, last time I was here, they were going to get me set up in a program. Everything was set. I walked out the street onto California Avenue, and the direction isn't important. But she said, if I went north, I was going to the program. If I went south, I was going back to my old friends. And I stood there, and I went south. And I'm back here. She goes, this time, they're not letting anything fail. They're meeting me at the curb, and they're going to get me there. And I remember the light bulb went in my head. I go, we should be doing that. I mean, that's what we can do the same thing. I got all these buses and trucks sitting around. Why not use them? Yeah. So we're always open to more suggestions. We keep evolving. So, any ideas, let us know. Way over time. Thank you so much for having me.